Zophar the Naamathite insists that the wicked never get to enjoy their ill-gotten gains. It always gets snatched away from them, and they have their lives in misery. But Job basically replies, what world are you living in, Zophar? Don't you see all the wicked, oppressive tyrants who go to their death still wealthy and have huge, honorable ceremonies for their funerals? What you say does not match reality. Let's open the Word of God and think on these things. This is the Word of Truth Ministry video library. I am Nathan C. Johnson, Bible teacher. I greet you in the faith and fellowship of our great God and Savior, the Lord Jesus Christ, whose we are, whom we love, and whom we serve. Open your Bibles with me to Job chapter 20, where we are continuing this ongoing argument between Job and his three friends. Remember, I've told you he has three friends, and they each have three addresses, and Job gives three answers to them. And we are on the second set of addresses. Remember, Eliphaz, in his first address especially, talked about human experience, Bildad, human tradition, and Zophar, human merit. And now we have come upon the second address of Zophar the Naamathite, Job 20 and verse 1. Then answered Zophar the Naamathite and said, so this is Zophar's second address. And then from now on, I'll be reading as normal out of the version of Job of E.W. Bullinger in his companion Bible. Verse 2, not so. My thoughts impel me to respond, and therefore is my haste within me roused. Zophar says, not so. Not so, Job. You aren't right at all. I disagree. And he and his three friends are never going to admit that they're wrong. He says he's hasty, he's anxious to answer, because he wants to answer what Job has said. Verse 3, correction meant for my reproof I hear, but zeal with knowledge gives me a reply. So he admits he's heard correction meant to reprove him. But does Zophar accept this reproof? Not at all. Not at all. He's learned nothing from what Job has said to him. He says zeal. And the word there is Hebrew ruach, which is the word for spirit. His spirit. And your spirit is sometimes used, yes, for zeal, for energy. We say that's a spirited person. So Bullinger has translated it zeal. Zeal with knowledge. He says, I know better than you do, Job. My knowledge gives me reason to reply. And it means to reply. Verse 4. Knowest thou not this? A truth of olden time, since Adam first was placed upon the earth. So Zophar is going to answer Job, and he's basically here answering Job's hope for a future. Remember back in chapter 19, he hoped for a future. He said, I know that my Redeemer lives, and at the latter day on earth shall stand. And after worms this body have consumed, yet in my flesh I shall Eloah see. Whom e'en I shall see upon my side, mine eyes shall see him, stranger now no more. For this my inmost soul with longing waits. So this was Job's claim, but Zophar has no intention of leaving him with it, of letting that slide, of letting that pass. Zophar says, no way. So he says, this is a truth of olden time, since Adam was first placed upon the earth. Olden time there is Hebrew ad. To longest duration past, way, way back in the past, this truth has been known. Verse 5. That brief the triumph of the wicked is, and momentary is the sinner's joy. So he says, ever since creation in Adam, this has been true, that the wicked only triumph briefly. He says it's like you, Job. Look at you, Exhibit A. You seemed to triumph for a while, but it was only brief. Well, that's what happens to wicked people. He says, momentary is the sinner's joy. In other words, Job, you have no hope in the latter day like you were talking about back in chapter 19, verse 25. No way. No way. Your joy is brief. You don't have long joy in the future to look forward to. And we see here, remember, who is behind the attack on Job. We see here Satan's sneering accusation against Job, spoken through his three friends. Verse 6, his joy may mount up to the very skies, his head reach up onto the highest clouds. So he says this is what can happen to the wicked who, like he said, appear to triumph for a brief time like Job did. He appeared to triumph for a brief time. And he says, Job, it was like your head had reached the clouds, the Hebrew rosh, head, which can also mean the outflowing source, like the source of his wealth and power could reach to the clouds. Verse 7, like his own stubble he is swept away, and they who see shall say, where is he gone? So in spite of his source of power seeming to reach to the clouds, he'll be swept away like his own stubble. And Bullinger translates it that way, like the stubble or the beard hair. Certainly when I finish shaving my beard hair, I get rid of it. And of course they would dry shave. I would often shave with shaving cream, so I wouldn't sweep the beard hairs away, but they would dry shave, and so they could sweep those beard hairs away. The King James translates it here dung, but dung doesn't seem like something you'd sweep. And this is speaking of something that swept away. The beard hair, Bullinger's probably right. And they who see shall say, where is he gone? It's like, this wicked person, where did he go? Like, whatever happened to Job anyway? Verse 8, he fleeth as a dream and is not found. He is chased away like visions of the night. And certainly like a dream, when you wake up, it's gone. I remembered I dreamed once I had a fiancé and a future father-in-law. I dreamed that. Well, when I woke up, it was gone. I had no such thing. That was a dream I had when I was a young man. Well, when you wake up, the dream is gone. It was just a dream. There was no reality to it. Well, that's like the fate of the wicked. It's like you thought you saw that wicked person. He was powerful and everything, but he is swept away. He's gone. It is like a dream, like a vision of the night. It's chased away when it's over. Verse 9, the eye which saw him sees him not again. His dwelling place descrieth him no more. So the eyes who typically saw him, who viewed him in his prosperity, they see him no more. He's gone. Those eyes don't behold him anymore. And his dwelling place descrieth, his dwelling place can't make him out anymore. Of course, your dwelling place is where you're usually found. You're often found there, your normal place. But his normal place doesn't see him there anymore either. Verse 10, his children shall pay court unto the poor, and his own hands give back again his wealth. So his children, by the Hebrew is benim, his sons. His sons will look to the poor, to the weak, to the powerless for help. They are so far reduced, he says, that they can't go to the powerful for help. They have to go to the weak. They have to go to the impoverished for help. That's how far they've been brought down. Well, at least I'll give so far this. He's speaking generically. Not like Bildad, who seems to be maybe a little less bright than his two friends, who practically describes Job exactly, and his children being dead. At least so far makes it a little generic, because Job didn't have any children left. But he says, well, he could have his children left, but they'd have to go to the weak for help. They couldn't go to the strong. So at least he's a little more subtle than Bildad, who didn't seem to want to describe anything to the wicked except exactly what happened to Job. Then what's this about his hands giving back his wealth? Well, according to the law, a thief, when he's caught, would have to restore threefold or fourfold, depending on what it was he had stolen. So he's suggesting that this wicked one was a thief, and he will be forced at his comeuppance to give back his wealth with his own hands to those he stole it from. So he says, Job, you must have stole your wealth. Verse 11, his bones are filled with sins in secret done, and with him in the dust they shall lie down. So his bones, his inner being, his very structure of your body is your bones. So the very structure of his life is filled with sins done in secret. Sins that no one could see. He says, I'll admit we haven't seen you doing any sins, Job, but your very bones, the very structure of your wealth must be filled with such secret sins that we haven't seen. And he says those secret sins will lie down with him in the dust, in the soil. The word is the same word as in Genesis 2:7, that God made man from the dust, or the topsoil of the ground. So he says when he lies down in death, these secret sins will still be with him. In other words, unforgiven. Verse 12, though wickedness will in his mouth be sweet, though underneath his tongue he keep it hid. So he's suggesting that wickedness, and the word there is ra'ah. The Hebrew word ra'ah, it's far more often translated evil than wickedness. And I would suggest that it means, its basic meaning is calamity. And it's only sin, we might say almost by extension, by a figure, in that sin and wickedness bring calamity. So he has calamity causing works, causing calamity for others. That's in his mouth, and it's sweet. He keeps it under his tongue. So he's describing it, these acts that cause calamity to others were like candy in his mouth. He enjoyed them, he kept them in there. Verse 13, keeping it long and loath to let it go, retaining it within his palate's taste. And I've probably done that with candy, and you've done it. You put it under your tongue, you keep it in your mouth, you suck on it as long as you can because you like the taste. He says, this is the way this wicked one acted with his calamity-causing works. He kept him in his mouth like candy, enjoying the taste. Verse 14, yet in his bowels is his food all changed. Within him it becomes the gall of asps. He says, when it gets down into his bowels, when it gets down into his inner being, why then it becomes something different. It's no longer so sweet. It becomes changed. It becomes like the poison of asps, of a poisonous snake. Verse 15, he swallowed wealth, but vomiteth it up. Yea, from his belly God will drive it forth. So he swallowed down wealth, this wealth he got from others through his calamity-causing works, yet in the end he's going to vomit it back up. And God here is the El, the mighty God, well, he will drive it out of him. He'll drive it out of his belly, he says. Just like he drove it out of your belly, Job. Verse 16, the venom of the adder shall he suck. The poison of the viper slayeth him. So he discovers that these calamity-causing acts that he sucked down and thought they tasted so sweet, he was actually sucking like the venom of the adder and like the poison of the viper. And these things will slay him in the end. This wickedness he relied on will slay him in the end, he says, just like it's happened to you, Job. Your wicked acts are slaying you in the end. Verse 17, he shall not look upon the flowing streams, or floods, or brooks of honey and of milk. And I think these things stand for life's good. Remember when God told Israel he was going to bring them into a good land, he told them it would be a land flowing with milk and honey. And that meant with the good things of life that people would look forward to and want and seek to enjoy. So he says that this wicked person will not look upon the flowing streams or floods or brooks of honey and milk. He'll not look on this prosperity that he hopes for, that the wicked would hope for. Verse 18, in vain he toiled. He shall not swallow it. Like wealth given back, in it he has no joy. So he says the wicked ultimately work for nothing, since in the end it won't turn out to be their increase. He says all this wealth they got by unjust means, they won't enjoy it. It'll just be like wealth given back. They won't get to enjoy their ill-gotten gains. Wealth, once you give it back to the person you got it from, well, you have no joy in it. You have no good from it once you gave it back. He says that's what the wealth gotten by this wicked person will be like. Verse 19, because he crushed and helpless left the poor, and seized upon a house he did not build. He says the reason this happens to the wicked person is what? Because he mistreated the poor. He crushed them. And because he seized property that didn't belong to him, a house he didn't build. Notice over and over, Zophar is making accusations against Job that he can't prove, and that ultimately aren't true. Job didn't do any of these things, yet he's accusing him of it over and over. Verse 20, because content within he never knew, nor let escape him aught that he desired. He says he was never content with what he had. He always wanted more. He always wanted to gain more. And what he desired, he didn't let escape him. He didn't care what means he had to use to get it. He didn't care what wicked means he had to use to get it. He wanted it, and so he got it. Verse 21, no, not a shred that he devoured not. Therefore it is, his wealth shall not endure. So he says he wouldn't let a shred go that he wanted without devouring it through his wicked acts. He says that's why his wealth won't last. That's why your wealth didn't last, Job, because you got that wealth through bad means. Verse 22, when it is at its height, his straits begin. The power of distress shall come upon him. So he says when your wealth is at its height, when the wicked's wealth is at its peak, why then suddenly he begins to be narrowed. He begins to be closed in. Strait, spelled S-T-R-A-I-T, means narrow. People talk about the straight and narrow way, but straight there is S-T-R-A-I-T, meaning narrow. So straight and narrow is more or less saying narrow and narrow. So when his wealth is at its height, his narrowing begins, and the power of distress comes on him. Just when he thinks he's at his height, just like you thought you were at your height, Job. And then he began to be narrowed, and the power of distress came on you. Verse 23, for when he is about to eat his food, then God shall send on him his burning wrath, and rain it on him for his punishment. So he says, just when you're about to eat your food, just when the wicked is about to enjoy his ill-gotten gains, then God sends on him his burning wrath. Then God rains his wrath on him for his punishment. He says, Job, you're experiencing all that you're experiencing because you got your wealth by oppression. Verse 24, though he may flee away from lance of steel, the shaft from bow of brass shall pierce him through. Now remember that Job, in his previous arguments, had used the figure of God bringing his army against him. God fighting against him, though he hadn't done anything to deserve it. Now Zophar uses the same figure, but insists it's because of his wickedness that he's having to flee from the lance of steel. It's because of his wickedness that the bow of brass pierces him through. He gets shot by God's arrow. Verse 25, and if one draws it forth from out his flesh, the gleaming arrowhead from out his gall, then other terrors shall upon him come. So he says, even if someone was able to extract God's arrow from his body, the Hebrew is actually from his back, like God shot him in the back while he was fleeing. He says still other terrors are going to come upon him. And notice how he's referring to these repeated troubles that have come on Job over and over and over again. Job's been struck by these troubles. He says that's what happens to a wicked person, Job. Verse 26, for his hid treasures every trouble waits. A fire not blown by man devours them all. It shall consume what in his tent is left. So every kind of trouble, he says, is lying in wait for his hidden treasures. For these treasures he secreted away, thinking that these were his through his ill-gotten means. He says that God's fire is going to devour them. A fire not blown by man devours them. Well, of course, that's blown by God. It shall consume what in his tent is left. Everything in his dwelling place will be consumed by God's fire because of his ill-gotten gains. Verse 27, the heavens shall his iniquity reveal. Against him riseth up the very earth. So, of course, by heavens, he refers to God. God reveals his iniquity. How does he reveal it? By punishing him. See, Job, I know you're wicked because God revealed you're wicked by punishing you. And so I can say with confidence, you're wicked, even though I can't prove it in any way. I know you're wicked because God showed it. Heaven rose up against you. So against him riseth up the very earth. The earth erets. The land itself rises up against. Why, look, Job, look at all these raiders who came and rose up against you and took your wealth. Why, they testify to the fact that you must have been wicked. Because, of course, raiders never raid a good person, only wicked, right? Verse 28, the increase of his house to exile goes, like flowing waters in God's day of wrath. So everything he gained, the increase of his house, goes into exile, goes off with raiders. Oh, look, what happened to you, Job? All your wealth went off with raiders. Yeah. Like flowing waters in God's day of wrath, all your wealth flowed away. Well, that was what happens to wicked people. Verse 29, such is the sinner's portion sent from God, and such the doom God hath appointed him. So he says that's the portion of the sinners that the Creator gives. And that's the doom El, the mighty God, gives such sinners. And surprise, surprise, Job. Why, that's what happened to you. That's exactly what happened to you, Job. What happens to sinners? What happens to wicked people? It's what happened to you. Why, that just shows you're getting the reward of your wickedness, Job. That just shows you must have deserved it. Well, it sounds very convincing the way Zophar tells it, but the thing is, Job gets the answer. Chapter 21. So Job answers, and he argues, the wicked wealthy often die in peace. Chapter 21. But Job answered and said, Job's second reply to Zophar's second address. Verse 2, Oh, do but list with patience to my words, and so let this your consolation be. So Job appeals to them to patiently listen to him again and be consoled by doing so. Now, why would they be consoled by listening to Job? Well, I think Job senses the truth that his three friends are afraid. Why are they afraid? Well, because if what Job is saying is true. If just arbitrarily calamity can come upon you, even though you didn't do anything wrong, why, that's frightful, because that could happen to anybody. That could happen to them. So they want to pat themselves on the back and assure themselves, oh, this could never happen to me because I'm righteous. Maybe they even find frightening the idea that God could strike someone down who's innocent. Well, that would be a frightening thought, wouldn't it? If you thought God could pour out his wrath on innocent people, that would be scary. But Job says, listen to my words and be consoled. Look, you don't have to be so scared so far. Verse 3, Oh, bear with me, I pray, and let me speak. And after I have done, thou canst mock on. So he says, be patient and let me have my say. Then afterwards, Hebrew achar, as a result of what I say, well, then you can go on mocking. Then you can go on making fun of me. But let me have my say first. Verse 4, Is it to man that my appeal I make? Might I not in that case impatient be? So he says, am I making my appeal to someone from Adam's race? To a fellow human being like me? Well, in that case, my spirit, my ruach, it might be impatient. Because maybe the man isn't dealing with me like he should, or judging me quickly enough, or whatever the case is. Verse 5, Turn now and look on me, and stand amazed, and lay ye now your hand upon your mouth. So he says, if you would just stop talking for a minute, you three friends, and just look at me. Look at me and let the realization of what's happened to me really sink in. Then maybe you'd put your hand on your mouth and stop giving such foolish answers to what I'm saying. Verse 6, For when I think of it, I am dismayed, and trembling taketh hold upon my flesh. Job says, I know when I think of it, I am dismayed. I have been thinking of it, and it affects me. Trembling takes hold on my flesh. It causes me dismay and trembling. I would have liked to think in my prosperity, because I'm so good, I'll always be prosperous. But now that I really look on it and think about it, it makes me dismayed that there is no such rule, that if you're good, you'll prosper. Verse 7, Why suffers God ungodly men to live, and to grow old, yea, to wax strong in power? So here's his premise. And he starts out with a question, why does God allow the ungodly to live strong and grow old? And get stronger and stronger and stronger. As these wicked old men get older and older, they just get stronger and stronger. In other words, if what you were saying was true, we shouldn't see wicked old men. And yet we do. We see wicked old men. Why do we see wicked old men? Why does God allow it? Verse 8, With them their seed is established. Yea, with them their offspring live and grow before their eyes. So he says, far from having their offspring destroyed, like Bildad said, or having their offspring so reduced that they have to go to some poor, weak person to try to get help, because they're that helpless. They think a poor, weak person could help them, have more strength than they have. He says, far from that, these wicked old people have their seed established. They're strong. They're on a firm foundation. They have no fear. And their offspring live and grow before their eyes. They watch them grow up in satisfaction. Look how good things are for my children. Verse 9, Their houses are in peace. They know no fear. No scourge descends on them from God's hand. So their houses are in peace. The Hebrew is there is shalom. Just overall goodness and soundness and health and happiness. There's just shalom in their houses. They aren't afraid. They aren't afraid. You're afraid. But these wicked people aren't. And no scourge descends upon them from a lowest hand. Eloah is the venerable God, the God who deserves to be worshipped. Yes, he deserves to be worshipped. But these wicked old men, no scourge descends on them from his hand. So what's Job's point? Well, they claim that Job is suffering because of some secret wickedness they didn't know about, nobody knew about, but Job is suffering from it. So Job says, wait a minute, what about the openly wicked? Why are they left untouched? And this amazes me. Some people who always want to search out secret wickedness. Ooh, they want to find the secret wickedness hidden in Pokemon. And say, oh, I'm so smart, I knew to reject Pokemon because of the hidden wickedness. And I keep my kids away from that Pokemon. It's got hidden wickedness in it. And then they'll let their kids watch TV shows that have open wickedness in it. Wear the wickedness on their sleeve. They have no trouble with that. But oh, the secret wickedness, I'm going to search that out. I've seen people do that. Well, am I supposed to call that good parenting? But here Job's friends are acting that way. Oh, we searched out your secret wickedness, Job. Meanwhile, here's the openly wicked parading on happily. Nothing's happening to him, and they don't notice him. They don't pay any attention to him. What they pay attention to is Job's secret wickedness that they think they've searched out. And the openly wicked that prosper, they ignore. Verse 10, their bull engendereth, and doth not fail. Their cow doth calve, and casteth not her calf. Well, of course, this is a large part of their wealth back then, was their animals. And so he says their animals all is successful. The bulls are managing to impregnate the cows, and the cows are managing to bring their calves forth, and everything's going great. Verse 11, their little children skip about like lambs. Their elder children mingle in the dance. So look at the houses of these wicked old men and the young children in their houses, whether they're their own or their grandkids or whoever, why they're skipping around happily playing like young children do. And the older children, they grow up, what are they doing? Well, they're getting together in dances, in mixers with the opposite sex and having their parties, and everything's going good. That's what you expect older children to do. Everything's going good with their children. They're all happy. They're all playing at the things children play at, and nothing's wrong with them. What about wicked people like that? Three friends. Verse 12, with timbrel and with harp they lift their voice, and merry make with cheerful sound of pipe. So with the drum and with the harp and with the pipe, with music, they're having a party. They're having a concert. They're enjoying themselves, these wicked people. Verse 13, they in prosperity complete their days, and in a moment to the grave go down. He says, far from their wickedness and their wealth gotten by wickedness only lasting a short time, they come to the end of their long lives still prosperous. And they don't even suffer a long, excruciating death. They go down to the grave in a moment. In a moment, they go down to Sheol, to the state of death. They have an easy death. You can't even console yourselves that they suffered a hard death. Verse 14, yea, unto God they say, depart from us. No knowledge of thy ways do we desire. So they have all this good in spite of the fact that they told El, the mighty God, to depart and rejected his ways. They said, I won't go that way. I'm going to go my own wicked way. Verse 15, pray, who is Shaddai, that we him should serve? And what the profit, if to him we pray? So again, this wicked person says, who's Shaddai? Who's this all-bountiful God? That I should serve him. Look at all the bounty I have without serving him. So what profit would it do me to serve him, since I'm already rich and in prosperity without him? Verse 16, but lo, their good comes not from their own hand. Far be the way of wicked men from me. So he says, look, I know that the good things these wicked people are enjoying are not their own. All these bounties that they enjoy are God's bounties. I'm not saying they aren't. And I'm not saying that I'm going their wicked way because I figure, well, wicked people get away with it, so I might as well be wicked. No, that's not what I'm saying, Job says. Far be the wicked way from me. I do not go the way of the wicked. I have not gone the way of the wicked. Verse 17, but yet ye say, how oft goes out the lamp of evil men? How oft calamity doth on them come? How oft are pangs apportioned them in wrath? He says, you claim that this is happening all the time. That evil men's lamp goes out, that calamity comes on them, that there are apportioned pangs and wrath. He says, you say this happens all the time. Well, where's the evidence for it? Where all are these wicked men that come to calamity like you say they're always coming to calamity? Verse 18, how oft are they as straw before the blast? Like chaff the storm and tempest drive away. So he's still repeating the things that Zophar said or implied. That he says reality puts the lie to these things. You say this happens all the time. I don't see this happening in real life. I don't see the wicked coming to this kind of calamity. Verse 19, ye say, Eloah lays up for his sons the father's evil life in recompense. He says, you claim that the venerable God brings the father's evil life against their sons. He says, just look at reality and see it's not so. Verse 20, that his own eyes may all the trouble see, when from the wrath of Shaddai he shall drink. So he says, you say that this wicked will see the calamity come upon him in his lifetime. He says, you say that he'll drink wrath from Shaddai, the all-bountiful God. Verse 21, what pleasure hath he in prosperity, when cut off is the number of his months? He says, you say that the wicked gets no pleasure in his ill-gotten gains, because his life is cut off early. But he's basically saying, is this really what we see going on around us? Verse 22, is it to God that one can knowledge teach, seeing 'tis he who judgeth things on high? He says, do you imagine so far that you could teach the mighty God, the mighty God, that you could teach him knowledge like you're trying to teach me? Because look, things in the world are not like you say they are. So try teaching God, oh, things shouldn't be this way, God. You've messed up. Things ought to be different. Tell that to God rather than to me. Go ahead, I dare you. Verse 23, for lo, one dieth in the very height of his prosperity, calm and at ease. He says, on the contrary, if you just look at wicked people, you keep talking about all these wicked people, well, you say, I have secret wickedness. Look at an openly wicked person. And you'll see this person dies at the height of his wealth and prosperity. He dies calm and at ease. That's how he dies. Verse 24, his breasts are full of nourishment. His bones with marrow are well moistened and fresh. His breasts are full of nourishment or milk. Bullinger suggests the breasts might be skin bottles. And yet, of course, he could be considering his household, whether it's the animals or the women in his household. Why they're successfully having children, their breasts are full of nourishment. Then his bones with marrow are well moistened and fresh. So his bones, the structure of his body, standing for the structure of his wealth, it's healthy. His wealth is good and strong and stable. Verse 25, another dies in bitterness of soul, and never has he tasted any good. So Job is not saying, I'm not saying this is always the way it is. No, by no means. I'm not saying that every wicked person prospers. Well, you can always say, oh, look at this wicked person, and look how bad he had it. And look at this wicked person, look how bad he had it. Job says, no, I know that there are wicked people who die in bitterness of soul, never having tasted any good. I know there are wicked people who go through their whole lives basically in misery. Always poor, always downtrodden, always bitter. I know there are wicked people like that. I'm not saying all the wicked people are prosperous. You can always drag forward an example of a wicked person who's had a hard life. Yeah, I know that. I've seen wicked people like that too. Verse 26, together in the dust they both lie down. Alike or both the worm its covering spreads. So he says both kinds of wicked people. The kind that prospered and the kind that never prospered die the same way. They both lie down in the dust. The prosperous and the impoverished wicked. Dust, again, is like in Genesis 2:7, the topsoil. Verse 25, another dies in bitterness of soul, and never has he tasted any good. So Job says, I know that this is not universally the way it is. I know every wicked person isn't prosperous. There are some wicked people, yes, who die in bitterness of soul, Hebrew nephesh, the soul. And they never tasted any good. They never got any good out of life. Their whole lives long, these people have been wicked, and their whole lives long, they've been bitter and they've been impoverished. Verse 26, together in the dust they both lie down. Alike or both the worm its covering spreads. He says, so they both die. They both come to their end. The prosperous wicked and the impoverished wicked. They both lie down in the soil. That's the word dust again. Genesis 2:7, the topsoil. So both the prosperous and the impoverished wicked die together. And what was the difference? What was the difference? You say all the wicked should die impoverished. I say no, some do, some don't. What's the difference? Verse 27, behold, my friends, I know your thoughts, which ye against me do so wrongfully maintain. He says, I know what you're thinking. I know you think I'm the wicked person you describe. He says that's wrong. Verse 28, ye say, where is the dwelling of the prince? And where the tent wherein the wicked dwell? He says, you ask this question. The noble wicked. Why, where is their tent now? It always ends in calamity. It always lands in disaster. He says, this is the question you ask. Where is the house of the successful wicked prince? Verse 29, have ye not asked of travelers? Do not ignore what they have noted down. They say. Job says, instead of sitting around in your ivory towers philosophizing, have you ever asked the people who really go out into the world and see things? Have you ever actually asked the travelers? Have you ever actually asked those who know, or do you just sit around philosophizing this and never put your philosophy into the test of the real world? What would the travelers who really know say? Verse 30, the wicked in the day of wrath is spared. Yea, in the day of wrath he doth escape. He says those who travel around would know that oftentimes the people who escape in the days of calamity are the wicked. Disaster comes on people much better people than they were, and yet these wicked somehow seem to save their own skins and weasel their way out of trouble. That's what the travelers would tell you. Verse 31, who to his face will dare denounce his way? Who shall requite him that which he hath done? Would you dare to go and denounce the powerful wicked? Would you walk up to Joseph Stalin and say, how dare you be godless and wicked like you've been? Would you walk up to Mao Zedong and say, I'm here to make sure that you get yours? Try it once. And these men who ruled great nations and were powerful and caused the deaths of millions of people. And yet what happens when they die? They're buried in state under a huge monument. Are you going to do anything about them so far? Are you going to bring them to the justice they deserve and never see? Verse 32, he too will be escorted to the tomb, and o'er his monument one keepeth watch. So this wicked noble, whom no one can bring to justice, well, he has an honor escort to his tomb. And after he's buried, guards watch over his monument. Even after death, he's still honored in spite of his wickedness. He never has this come down you talked about. Verse 33, the valley's clods do gently cover him. Behold, the mourners come in lengthened train. Before they all in countless numbers walk. He says he rests easy in the grave. The valley's clouds gently cover him. And he says, as for his funeral procession, the mourners come in lengthened train. There's a huge train of mourners following this prosperous, wicked oppressor. And in front of his casket, countless numbers walk in procession to guide this wicked oppressor to his final resting place. Verse 34, how then console ye me with worthless words, seeing your answers only failure prove? He says, how can you console me with such nonsense? Your answers prove false when compared with what really happens. What are you talking about? What are you talking about? Just look at the world. Get off your high horse and look at the world, and you see that you're wrong. This is not the way it happens. Well, Job is certainly right, but his friends are not about to admit it. So Zophar insists that Job's arguments are wrong. And Job has no future like he said he did. He insists wicked people enjoy their ill-gotten, stolen gains like candy in their mouths for a brief time. When they finally swallow them, they turn to poison. God sees to it they never get to enjoy what they gained. And their children end up so helpless they seek favor from the weak. God strikes him down and his wealth goes into exile. Yet Job says, if you'll actually look at me and consider what you see and actually look at the world around you, you'll find your philosophies are empty. Have you ever actually asked those who travel around and know what's really going on? Know the way the world really is? The wealthy, powerful, wicked often live to old age in peace and prosperity. The wealthy, powerful, wicked often see their children strong, happy, and established, having a good old time. Yes, some wicked never see prosperity. From birth to death live in bitterness. But what's the difference? And when the day of calamity comes, sometimes those who escape it are the wicked, and they weasel their way out of the calamities they deserved. The wicked wealthy have an easy death and a large funeral, many mourners and great monument to remember them. So he says, how can you argue such foolishness, Zophar? What you say just denies reality. And Job is right, it does. And what Zophar said was foolish. Well, you'd think that argument could have silenced Job's three friends, but it didn't. And we'll see next time. They start a third time to try to convince Job. But we will consider that in our next study. Thank you for watching. Please press like below and comment. That helps us and helps promote our videos. So at least press like. If you have the time, please comment. Thank you for watching. Until we gather again around the pages of God's book, I bid you goodbye.